Hello, welcome to another episode of Arthritis and You, A Joint Journey. Today, we've got something special lined up, so buckle up because it's time for the deep dive. Let's give a warm welcome to our hosts, Arthur and Sarah.
Hey everyone, excited to be diving into something super interesting today. We're going to be exploring the world of rheumatoid arthritis risk factors, and we've got a great guide for this deep dive, a video by the experts over at Alberta Rheumatology. I think most of you probably already know a bit about RA, like it affects something like 1% of people. But what's really cool is that we're constantly learning more about those things that might make us more or less likely to develop it. So while we can't totally prevent RA, knowing more about these factors can help us make smarter choices for our health. So let's get started.
One of the things I always find interesting is how many people mix up RA with osteoarthritis.
Yeah, when I first heard of RA, I just thought it was all about achy joints, like with osteoarthritis. But it turns out it can be a lot more serious than that. So can you break down the difference for us?
Definitely. So with osteoarthritis, it's mainly about wear and tear on those joints over time. But RA is different. It's an autoimmune disease, which means your immune system is basically attacking your own healthy tissues. And with RA, it's specifically targeting the lining of your joints. And that leads to the pain, the stiffness, and the swelling people experience.
And you mentioned it can be more serious than just achy joints, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, if it's not treated, RA can actually cause permanent damage to your joints, and it can even affect other organs, like your heart and lungs, and in some cases, it can even contribute to an earlier death. So that's why it's so important to really understand these risk factors.
Wow, okay, that definitely makes this deep dive even more important. So let's start with genetics. How much does your family history really matter when it comes to RA risk?
Well, genetics definitely play a role, but it's not quite as simple as you might think. It's more like a complex web of interactions. You might inherit genes that increase your chances of developing RA, but that doesn't automatically mean you'll get it.
So there's still hope, even if RA runs in your family? That's good to know.
Exactly. In fact, studies with identical twins have shown something really interesting. Identical twins share 100% of their genes, right? But even then, if one twin gets RA, the other one only develops it about half the time. So that tells us that even with the same genes, something else is definitely playing a role in whether RA develops or not.
Wow, that's a powerful reminder that genes aren't everything. You mentioned something earlier called a shared epitope. Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. So within this whole complex world of genetics, researchers have identified a specific genetic marker called a shared epitope. You can kind of think of it like a red flag on your DNA, a signal that you might have a higher risk of getting RA. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it's something that researchers are really focusing on.
That's fascinating. Sounds like we're getting closer to cracking the code on the genetics of RA. All right, so we've talked about genes, but what about gender? Does that come into play at all?
Absolutely. Women are actually 3 times more likely to develop RA than men. We don't know exactly why that is, but some theories suggest that estrogen might have something to do with it.
There's something they mentioned in the Alberta Rheumatology video that I found really interesting. They said that pregnancy often puts RA into remission. It seems kind of counterintuitive. You'd think pregnancy would be more stressful on the body.
You're right. It's pretty surprising. And it's actually one of the things that makes RA so different from other types of arthritis. It shows just how complex the relationship is between hormones and the immune system. Researchers are still figuring out exactly how it works, but it's definitely a fascinating phenomenon.
Okay, so we've talked about genetics and gender, things we can't really control. But what about the things we can do something about? What are some of the lifestyle factors that might affect our risk of developing RA?
That's where things get really interesting and empowering, because there actually are things we can actively do to lower our risk. Let's start with the big one. Smoke.
I know smoking is bad for pretty much everything, but how does it specifically impact RA? What makes it such a big deal?
Well, smoking over a long period of time actually doubles your risk of getting RA. And not only that, it can also make the disease worse if you do get it. And it can even mess with how well treatments work.
Wow, that's pretty serious, especially if you already have some of those genetic risk factors we talked about earlier, right?
Exactly. If you smoke and you have those specific genetic markers, your risk can jump to 20 times higher than someone who doesn't smoke. So quitting smoking is honestly one of the most impactful things you can do, even if you've been smoking for years. Quitting significantly reduces your risk And if you do develop RA, it can really improve your chances of managing it effectively.
Okay, so quitting smoking message received loud and clear. What about weight? I know it's linked to a lot of health issues, but how does it fit into the whole RA picture?
So being overweight, especially obese, can increase your risk of RA. And just like smoking, it can make treatments less effective. That's because extra weight causes more inflammation throughout your body, and that puts extra stress on your joints, making them more vulnerable to RA. So managing your weight through things like a healthy diet and exercise can really make a difference, not just for your overall health, but also for your risk of RA.
All right, so we've got quitting smoking and managing our weight. Any other lifestyle choices we should be thinking about?
There's some interesting new research coming out about a link between poor dental health and RA. Might seem a bit strange at first, but it points to a really fascinating area of research, the role of the gut microbiome.
The gut microbiome. That seems to be popping up everywhere these days. Can you explain what it is and how it relates to RA?
Sure. So think of your gut microbiome as this massive, intricate ecosystem inside your digestive system. It's home to trillions of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and all these other microorganisms. It's basically like a miniature rainforest, full of all these different life forms. And they all play a role in keeping things balanced and healthy.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. But how does this rainforest in our gut affect something like our joints?
Well, what we're learning is that having a balanced and diverse gut microbiome is super important for a healthy immune system. When that balance gets thrown off, we call this dysbiosis, it can cause inflammation throughout the body.
So it's like a domino effect. Something messes up the balance in the gut, and then that triggers inflammation, and that inflammation can eventually reach the joints.
Exactly. And while the research is still pretty new, there's more and more evidence suggesting that this imbalance in the gut microbiome could be a big part of why some people develop RA and how severe it gets.
Wow, that's incredible. I never would have thought that the bacteria in my gut could affect my joints. So how do we keep our gut microbiome happy? Is it all about eating yogurt and fermented foods?
Those can definitely be helpful, but it's really about fostering diversity in your gut. A diet that's rich in all sorts of different fruits, vegetables, and whole grains is key. Fiber is especially important. It acts as a prebiotic, basically food for the good bacteria in your gut.
So it's like we're feeding our gut bacteria a healthy, diverse diet, just like we should be doing for ourselves. What about things to avoid? Are there certain foods or habits that can mess up the gut microbiome and potentially increase our risk of RA?
You're exactly right. And yes, there are definitely things to be mindful of. Processed foods, sugary drinks, and eating a lot of saturated fat, those can all disrupt that balance of bacteria in your gut. Think of it this way. Those foods often lack the fiber and nutrients that good bacteria need to thrive. And at the same time, they can promote the growth of the less beneficial bacteria.
So we're basically starving the good guys and feeding the bad guys. I'm definitely going to be more careful about those processed food choices now.
It's all about making informed choices, right?
Sure.
And it's not just about diet either. Chronic stress and not getting enough sleep can also disrupt the gut microbiome, and that can lead to more inflammation. So it's really a holistic approach. Taking care of your mental and emotional well-being is just as important as what you eat.
This is starting to feel like a choose-your-own-adventure story for our health. It's pretty amazing to realize how much control we actually have.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It really highlights the power we have to influence our own health outcomes. We can't change our genes, but we can change the environment they operate in.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. So let's recap. If someone's listening to this and thinking, okay, I want to lower my risk of RA, what are the key things to remember?
First and foremost, if you smoke, quitting is honestly the best thing you can do for yourself. It makes a huge difference in reducing your risk. And it can even improve treatment outcomes if you do end up developing RA.
Okay, no more excuses for not quitting smoking. What else should we be focusing on?
Maintaining a healthy weight is really important. Not only does it lower your risk of RA, but it also has tons of other benefits for your overall health. And it can make treatments more effective too.
Right. And speaking of those pearly whites,
Yes.
taking good care of our dental health might not seem like a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but it could actually be another piece of the RA puzzle, especially when it comes to maintaining that balanced gut microbiome we were just talking about, which, as we've learned, could have a real impact on our RA risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It all comes back to those healthy habits, the ones we've always heard about. But now we're starting to see the connections between those habits and complex conditions like RRA. It's really amazing how seemingly unrelated things can be so interconnected.
It really is. So we've talked about diet, exercise, dental hygiene. anything else we can do to support our overall health and maybe lower our risk.
While managing stress and getting enough sleep are both super important for a healthy immune system, they might not directly prevent RA, but they can definitely help you manage it if you do develop it. And, of course, they're great for your overall well-being, too.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. It feels like we've uncovered so much about this complex condition, and it's really empowering to realize that we have more control than we might think.
I totally agree. It's not about being afraid of getting RA. It's about understanding what factors are at play and making choices that support our long-term health.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big takeaway you want listeners to walk away with?
I think the most important thing is to remember that knowledge is power. We've learned that RA is this complex interplay of genetics, lifestyle, and even this fascinating world of the gut microbiome. And while we can't completely eliminate the risk of developing RA, we're not helpless. By understanding these factors, we can make choices that empower us to live healthier lives, reduce our risk, and improve our chances of managing the condition effectively if it does develop.
So well said. It's not about erasing risk entirely. It's about taking ownership of our health and making those choices that can really make a difference.
Exactly. It's about being proactive about our health. Understanding that every choice we make can have a ripple effect on our well-being.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure. I hope this deep dive has encouraged listeners to learn more about RA and to make those informed choices about their health.
Absolutely. And for anyone who wants to learn more, we encourage you to check out the Alberta Rheumatology website. It's albertarheumatology.com. They've got tons of great information on RA and other rheumatic conditions. So until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, knowledge is power.
This has been another episode of Arthritis and You, A Joint Journey, brought to you by the Rheum team from albertarheumatology.com, your trusted evidence-based suite of resources available 24/7. Straight from Alberta, but for folks around the world. Our hosts today, Arthritis and Sarah Upis, technical producer, John Ifun, and our executive producer, Stephen Cates. While we work hard to maintain the accuracy of our information, we accept no legal responsibility for any errors or omissions. Remember, always check with your own physician first. Join us next time for another Deep Dive.